Okay, so the first video you see on my YouTube channel, uploaded a couple of months ago, was about facial dysmorphia. One point I made was about plastic surgery, cosmetic surgery in particular, and specifically how there's a very real sentiment that keeps you from wanting to undergo plastic surgery, completely separate from just monetary limitations. One of them being losing your bodily autonomy by succumbing to beauty standards and the male gaze. After uploading that video, which by the way involved very little research since it was mostly about my personal experiences and beliefs, my dear friend Shamira sent me this article, which it's giving very early 2000s website design, images and text scattered wherever the fuck. I'll blur out the images because some of them are quite gory, which also leads me to the point where I say trigger warning for this video, and a lot of the links that I list in the description under the references. This video in general will get quite gory. But anyway, this article describes a performance art piece by a French artist called Orlan. The piece involved her undergoing plastic surgery while she was in a fully conscious state. The images in the article literally show parts of her skin being sliced into. Mind you, all of this is available to watch on YouTube completely for free, so you can watch it if you want to. The link is in the description, of course, as well as any other reference in this video. The one quote that really stood out to me in this article was the following:
I can observe my own body cut open without suffering. I see myself all the way down to my entrails, a new mirror stage. I can see to the heart of my lover. His splendid design has nothing to do with sickly sentimentalities. Darling, I love your spleen. I love your liver. I adore your pancreas, and the line of your femur excites me.
It goes without saying, but I was very inspired and immediately wanted to know more about this woman I had never heard of before. I have heard of her contemporaries like Marina Abramović and Yoko Ono, but she was entirely new to me. This article briefly covers this fascinating concept that she pioneered called carnal art, the name itself being really eye-catching. According to the Cambridge Advanced Learners Dictionary and Thesaurus, the word carnal is defined as relating to the physical feelings and wants of the body. But what exactly is carnal art? Part 1. No pain, all gain. On Orlan's website, she has a page that details exactly what carnal art is, and more importantly, what it isn't. As gory and bloody as the images and videos of her performance art surgeries may seem, Orlan is clear that carnal art is not rooted in suffering and martyrdom. It does not subscribe to any religious beliefs. If anything, it's deeply opposed to it. It definitely doesn't fall into the same category as 70s body art, which was a type of performance art dominated by male artists, wherein there was this strong expectation of putting your body through discomfort, often severe discomfort. Chris Burden is an example of a body artist. His piece titled Shoot involved him literally shooting his own arm with a gun. Another titled Transfixed, where he nailed himself to a Volkswagen Beetle. Take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt because it's entirely observational, but I don't understand why cishet men like to feel pain so much. It's almost as if because they don't have to, undergo a painful monthly menstrual cycle, as well as they aren't expected to bear children and are rewarded simply for being men and protected simply for being men by society at large. I think because of all this lack of pain, they seek out pain in their art and their lives in general to fill up some kind of void. Me and my friends often talk about how obsessed so many men are with physical and emotional pain. Given how many self-proclaimed alpha men exist with massive, mostly male followings who make their bread and butter off of getting men to feel trapped in their depression and even luring them to derive some sort of goodwill and honor from emotional pain and physical pain, especially with the kind of exercise routines and diets they promote. The whole thing feels a little bit concerning at the very least. I think the idea of pain being associated with purity has a lot to do with the patriarch, and generally speaking, there is so much more respect that is seemingly associated with everlasting strength and endurance and loss even, rather than convenience and vulnerability and pleasure. Orlan may have been awake through her surgeries, but she absolutely had epidural anesthetic injections administered to her. And she makes that point really, really clear in her work. She did not undergo the surgeries to prove a point to anybody but herself. I think she was very excited to see what lengths modern technology allowed her to take her body to, painlessly, on her own terms. She declares proudly,
Henceforth, we shall have epidurals, local anesthetics, and multiple analgesics. Hooray for morphine! Long live morphine. Down with the pain. Down with pain.
She wore costumes designed by Issey Miyake and Paco Rabanne for her surgeries, and from what I can tell from the images, her surgeons wore designer scrubs as well. Fabulous. These surgeries were glamorous, funny, exciting, and really not nihilistic or self-deprecatory or painful. Sure, there was an inherent risk from undergoing so many epidurals for the series of surgeries, but again, it wasn't done for some self-sacrificial or heroic reason. The risk of taking the epidural was a small compromise for what was a much larger and way more important objective for her. The objective being to fulfill her artistic vision of getting to her final form, so to speak. And for her, not doing that was riskier and more life-threatening than any epidural. It reminds me of a video by a popular stylist influencer that I follow on Instagram, whose name is Junie Casanova.
I want to talk about this comment right here. I would rather be ridiculed all day and quite frankly die for who I am than to be someone else or to hide who I am. It hurts way more to hide who I am than it does to hear words from strangers who don't matter. And if I can inspire someone to be who they are in the face of hatred, then I will have done what I meant to do on this earth. So they can spew all the hate that they want, but they're not going to scare me back into hiding or away from being beautiful.
Real diva shit.
Well, obviously, it's a very unusual story. Very unusual. Have you ever heard of an artist making herself?
Orlan's name is spelled in all caps. This motif really reminds me of Bell Hooks, who went for the all lowercase pseudonym as a way to draw attention to her message and work rather than to herself as an individual. To me, this makes a lot of sense as a writer whose work deals with a collective cause as massive as Black liberation, where the sentiment of individuality might do more harm than good. But Orlan took a very different approach as a performance artist who is trying to use modern day technology not just in the vein of altering herself, but to make herself more herself. The all caps is relevant. She uses the surgeries literally to make herself, but in bold font or indeed all caps. Often when I think of plastic surgery, cosmetic surgery, I immediately associate it with these intensive procedures that make you smaller and slimmer, whether it's your nose or your entire face or your waist. BBLs and lip injections are the only procedures that come to mind that make those specific features bigger. But from what I can tell on social media, it seems like people are starting to lose interest in BBLs and lip injections. I have been seeing left and right people dissolving their lip injections or people just kind of like reversing their BBLs as well. I think that's also a form of dissolving. I'm not really sure how that works, but I've definitely been seeing this kind of undoing of that work in the last 3 or 4 years or so. It seems as though people are not as interested and obsessed with those specific procedures. So somehow all body image related trends for women seems to always circle back to smallness and skinniness. Orlan's opinion on cosmetic surgery stands out from this, where she says,
Je pense qu'à notre époque, avec les technologies actuelles, la chirurgie, les avancées de la chirurgie, il est possible de réduire cet écart entre ce que l'on est et ce que l'on a.
She yearns to use tech to its fullest ability, and not doing that is doing a great disservice to this man-made marvel that is plastic surgery. I think in her mind, she would ask the question, why would anyone think to use plastic surgery simply to make themselves adhere to any standard when you can use that very same tech to successfully create the most version of yourself and then some. This realization and inspiration came to her in 1978 when she had an ectopic pregnancy and underwent a surgery to remove the inviable fetus, and she said,
I wasn't in pain, and what was happening to my body was a profound interest to me. Pain is an anachronism. I have great confidence in morphine.
Can I just also quickly say how much I love that her main takeaway from what is her miscarriage was not the pain from the loss of what would have been her baby, but the fact that anesthetics were really cool. Anyway, it was after that surgery that her series of plastic surgery operations began in 1990. When it came to like what kind of work she decided to do, she referred to many different art pieces, one of them being the Mona Lisa for her protruding brow bones. But I think the illest one is the ones that she got on her temples, which involved inserting these implants that were normally used for your cheekbones, but on her temples. So it's like this kind of protruding thing, like these humps, what people often refer to as like devil's horns whenever they would see them on her. I think it's really cool, and she also goes the extra mile to emphasize the already pretty obvious humps with glitter eyeliner. I love her. She's so sick. I love her.
I had this dream when I was really young that I could be whoever I wanted to be, and no matter what I visioned for myself, that I would do it no matter who didn't believe in me.
The humps brings me to my next point about our diva in question, and I thought it was really funny, and that's why I thought that I may as well include it in the video. In 2013, Orlan sued Gaga for nearly $32 million for plagiarism. As most of us know, I assume, Lady Gaga used prosthetics to create these obtrusions on her face around her that pointed out of her temples and her cheekbones and her shoulders. Orlan and her legal team accused Gaga of copying a couple of her works. No surprises here, but Orlan obviously definitely did not win this. And long story short, by the end of this whole debacle, she owed Gaga $22,000. There's something about this backfiring so badly for Orlan that is strangely kind of funny and on brand. I've been trying to think about why I feel that way. I guess it's because she's also kind of bizarre. Regardless, I also think that there's something about these two like powerhouse women with their ginormous personalities coming together via a lawsuit that's really, quite frankly, iconic. As far as my thoughts on the actual allegations go, I personally do think that there's some kind of plagiarism going on there. I see how Gaga's like creative directors or art directors or her makeup artists or even maybe Gaga herself could have been inspired by Orlan, or at least been familiar with her work, like been privy to her work, especially given the strong themes of birth as well as this call to reject arbitrary societal standards in Gaga's Born This Way era. The similarities are definitely there. The inspiration is there. It could have been a complete coincidence, but I think that in the whole research and development of the whole Born This Way era, like it would be ridiculous if you didn't come across Orlan's work. However, I do think Orlan's message is fundamentally different from Gaga's in the sense that I don't think Orlan would believe that one is born this way or one is born in any way, and that one has to make active decisions to create who they are as they go through life. I am aware that when Gaga says that one is born this way, she's referring to the fact that a lot of queer people often have to remain closeted or are even pushed to go to conversion camps. Hence, the phrase born this way or I'm born this way is kind of coming from the sentiment of like, I didn't ask for this is how I was born and I can't do much about it. And it's kind of like justifying yourself to queerphobic people. But I think Orlan might say that it's foolish and kind of worthless to justify your queerness to anyone with the Born This Way argument, because who the fuck is someone else to tell you whether or not it is okay for you to be queer, and why isn't it okay for you to realize your queerness at a later point in your life and come into your gender and sexuality after having gone through a significant amount of experience and just like living in general. I think that's how I feel like Orlan's message is like kind of different that way from Gaga's. Even Orlan herself did not begin her artistic career with surgical procedures. However, she was always interested in reincarnation and rebirth within the same life. It is evident in her past works, like her photograph titled Orlan Gives Birth to Her Beloved Self, and she was just 17 years old, so she's been thinking about birth and rebirth and just kind of like making your own life your own and customizing your appearance using modern day technology. I think she was kind of aware of that, you know, in the 60s. So I think this makes sense for her work to have then reached the point of like getting performance plastic surgeries. She lives to make art with herself and through herself. But apart from that, I can't seem to have any other opinions on who was right and wrong, and more importantly, whether or not this money is owed. Granted, one of these artists is significantly more successful than the other, but to me, these are both successful white women. It seems like they can kind of afford to have lawsuits thrown around in every direction. Ultimately, I don't think there was any real harm done. I could be wrong because performance artists are not getting paid. They might have fame, but they're not really getting paid. Like Orlan also doesn't even have that much fame, so I don't really know. But it seems like she's doing okay. These are the only opinions that I seem to have on this. But if you have any more, let me know in the comments below. I would love to know what everybody thinks about this lawsuit. I think it's really funny and really fascinating.
Il est d'autant plus bouleversant que l'homme fasse si bon marché de cette troupe, à laquelle il s'y attend.
Voilà quels sont des faits pour peu qu'on lui demande. Car il veut changer de peau. Il est bien clair que le seul bien qu'il possède.
Clearly the one good thing that we possess.
Moi, je n'ai que ma peau.
Whew. Orlan demonstrates that these new implants are no better or worse or more or less a part of her than her own organs. And in the process, she seems to show so much regard and respect for her body, not just this idea of a body or some vague sentiment attached to it. She thinks pain is anachronistic. She does not believe in suffering. She's simply using technology and the expertise of her surgeons to bridge this gap between the artistic vision she has of herself and her actual self. And she does it with pain meds. And she doesn't abuse these pain meds. She simply uses the drugs to not feel pain. That is purely rational and reasonable thinking, to me at least. Yes, her performances are drastic, but I don't think they're illogical, unsafe, incomprehensible, or even sentimental. Reiterating her quote, "I can see to the heart of my lover, his splendid design has nothing to do with sickly sentimentalities." These alpha male incel influencers with their $1,000 courses would look at someone like her and instantly call her ridiculous or dramatic, like how women are, and driven by emotions. But I don't really see what about this is ridiculous. It's all very literal. Her messaging is right in your face, and her approach to it follows a very clear logic. She's not asking you to reach out into the unknown and do some crazy deep dive into her philosophy. She does want you to ask questions about your own body and yourself, but she's not keeping anything away from you when it comes to her own work or the philosophy behind her work. This is also not a person who has body image issues or is suicidal. I mean, from what I've read, she literally keeps pieces of her fucking flesh from her past surgeries with her, like she stores it. So yeah, not suicidal. There's no self-harm or hatred going on there or any self-destructive tendencies or anxiety. Throughout her Carnal Art documentary, there are many scenes where she demands to be heard and makes sure to answer all questions that come her way while she's under the knife. There's a scene where her ear is being sliced off of her head by the surgeon to be able to insert an implant, I think. And she corrects the speaker, this man you hear in the background, that says that her ear being sliced is reminiscent of Van Gogh cutting off his own ear. She disagrees with this fervently and makes it clear that what she is undergoing is a methodical, meticulously performed surgery and a planned surgery, and she's not attempting to cut her ear off in the same hasty, self-destructive way that Van Gogh did, leaving his body to suffer.
Et un peu la suite de longue chaîne d'interventions depuis l'oreille de Van Gogh, un bout d'oreille.
Mais Jean-Paul, je voudrais te répondre tout de suite quelque chose. Je vais répondre quelque chose. Ah, ça fait un peu mal.
This is Orlan who's
Non,
responding to
je vais
Paris.
répondre. Dis Tom. Dis-le à Tom, je vais répondre.
L'intervention là qu'on a vue en vidéo par
Non,
encore
Sophie, dis à Tom que je veux répondre. Je ne suis pas d'accord avec la comparaison avec Van Gogh. C'est pas parce qu'on se coupe l'oreille dans un moment de folie ou de désespoir qu'on fait la même chose que moi.
Again, she clarified this point during the procedure. So she's getting this surgery and she's making herself really, really clear during the procedure. So yeah, this is a woman who is very much so of sound mind, who can definitely speak for herself and justify her actions and decisions in a very literal way. She's not once silent in these operation rooms. She's constantly talking, she answers questions, she reads poetry, and she's constantly talking about her art while the surgery is being performed. How else is a woman expected to respond to beauty standards that are as bizarre as they are without coming across as completely insane? I think her work makes her seem insane, but they're perfectly appropriate and sane responses, in my opinion, to beauty standards in their current condition. In an interview with Clot magazine, she says, "In my work, I try to portray our world most honestly and realistically as possible. What else has a girl gotta do?"
Toute ma vie, dans toute mon œuvre, j'ai toujours essayé de casser les barrières qui sont dans les têtes entre les sexes, entre les générations et aussi entre les pratiques artistiques.
There has been one instance where I have never even slightly questioned the legitimacy of cosmetic surgery. And that is when it comes to gender affirming cosmetic surgery. So when it's like facial feminization surgery or facial masculinization surgery. I think Orlan's work got me to think about this a little more differently than simply trans people get plastic surgery to have features that align more with their gender. I think generally speaking, this makes sense. Like on a very basic queerness 101 level, this makes sense. But I think this sort of implies a couple of things, which is that A, it makes it seem like the person who you were before the surgery was meaningless, and B, that there even is some strict dichotomy between who you were before and who you are now. I'm trying to do away, generally speaking, with this idea that trans people are the only people who experience gender dysmorphia. Cis people feel gender dysmorphia all the time. A lot of my facial dysmorphia stems from the fact that I don't feel like I look like a girl enough, even as a cisgender woman. Additionally, cis men are also often prescribed with testosterone supplements due to not feeling big enough, hairy enough, sexual enough. They take anabolic steroids along with doing their strenuous workouts in order to bulk up. I think cases like this really go to show the extent to which gender is a performance. There would be no reason for cis people to also opt for gender affirmation surgeries or hormone therapy if there wasn't this desire to transform into this version they have of themselves that they individually find to be perfect. It goes beyond gender and sex even. It's like this whole character that you're trying to emulate. And Orlan's surgeries can sort of be looked at as an affirming surgery. Her perfect idea of herself is not really, it doesn't seem to be rooted in gender, but I think it is rooted in trying to bridge the gap between how she perceives herself and how she is. And I think it would be beneficial to all of us if we had a similar attitude to transness and gender in general. And, you know, we sort of gave everybody this opportunity to think of themselves as an artist and think of their relationship with their body and how they want to present themselves as also like art, you know, like that's also like you being an artistic person. It's using tech to live up to the person that you envision in your head.
L'âme ne peut jamais ni être coupée en morceaux par une arme, ni brûlée par le feu, ni mouillée par l'eau, ni rétrécie par le vent. Une personne s'habille en des vêtements nouveaux, rejette les anciens, ainsi l'âme accepte de nouveaux corps matériels et rejette les anciens, vieux et inutile.
Let's go back to the beginning, what brought me to making this video in the first place. I feel like I was a little premature in demonizing plastic surgery and cosmetic surgery the way that I did in my earlier video. There is obviously this association with plastic surgery as we commonly understand it, and this act of falling in line with common notions and expectations and conceptions of beauty. But I think women like Orlan really open up a whole other can of worms. How to think about cosmetic surgery, how to think about any and all kinds of body modification. She'd said something in her documentary which was along the lines of like, your soul sort of catches up to your body whenever it undergoes change, as opposed to the opposite, where the soul is preserved by how little you experiment with your body. That makes complete sense to me. Women who get plastic surgery are obviously endlessly scrutinized for it. They may as well have not even done it, despite the fact that they were sort of pushed to doing it. They would have received the same, if not even less criticism for if they just went without it. I think Orlan reveals this very obvious and kind of insidious contradiction when it comes to surgery. If you don't get it, it's a problem. If you do get it, despite the fact that you were pushed into getting it, that could potentially be an even bigger problem. So no matter how small or big this procedure is and the changes may be, this just seems to be the case. She addresses this problem by doing crazy shit with her surgery, like giving herself humps on her temples. I mean, that's really something that I've never seen on a face. To put it simply, I think Orlan is really fucking cool, and immersing myself in her work and her insanely sane or sanely insane response to beauty standards really helps me set my head straight. Like, the shit is actually really good for me. It helps me put myself at ease, despite how uneasy the surgical performances are to watch.
Je suis désolée, je m'arrête maintenant et on fera la deuxième partie de l'opération dans 10 jours. Je ne veux pas souffrir davantage.
With all that being said, thank you for tuning into this video. It is quite different from the other two videos, but I feel like all of them are kind of slightly different from each other. I think that that's pretty much it. That's all that I wanted to talk about. I think there's a lot more to be said about her and about themes surrounding her. There's so many more things to get into via her work. I feel like she's insane, she's so crazy, but she's so normal at the same time. I find it very easy to understand where she's coming from, or like what would drive her to exploring things like these. I wish I had access to her books, but they're really hard to find, and if you can find them, then they're all in French. And there's just so much video work that she has and so many interviews that she's done that I was just kind of relying on those little tidbits, which there's so many of them. But that's about it. Thank you.
Bon, on m'a posé la question de savoir si pourquoi je me faisais pas 3 nez. D'abord, c'est absolument impossible techniquement. Et puis je veux pas non plus que ma vie soit complètement gâchée par ces 3 nez.